November 14th, 1883. The Wyoming Territory. History books will tell you about the gold rushes and the cattle wars, but they rarely mention the Great White Death that swept through the Wind River Range that year. It was a storm so cold it froze cattle where they stood. But in the middle of that white hell, a 20-year-old woman named Alara Vance did the unthinkable. She didn't just survive. She walked into the storm to answer a cry that no one else heard. What she pulled out of the snow wasn't just a child. It was the catalyst for a war, a forbidden love, and a courtroom drama that would shake the West to its knees. This is the true, untold story of how a frontier girl saved a chief's son, and why the most feared warrior in the territory rode to her door, not to kill her, but to claim her. The cabin walls groaned under the assault of the wind. It was a sound Alara Vance had grown used to after 3 years of living alone on the edge of the Silver Creek Basin. But tonight, the sound was different. It was angry. Alara adjusted the wick on her kerosene lamp, the flame flickering nervously. At 20 years old, Alara was not the kind of woman who spooked easily. She had buried her father, Elias Vance, on the hill behind the cabin 2 winters ago, digging the grave herself when the ground was hard as iron. Since then, she had run the homestead with nothing but a Winchester rifle and a stubborn refusal to move back east. Just the wind, she whispered to herself, pulling her shawl tighter. The thermometer on the porch had read 20 below zero before the sun even set. Now, it was likely 40 below. She was about to douse the light when she heard it. It wasn't the howl of a timber wolf, and it wasn't the scream of a mountain cat. It was a sound that didn't belong in the wilderness, a rhythmic, desperate wail. A child. Alara froze. Impossible, she muttered. The nearest neighbor, Old Man Miller, was 5 miles away, and he certainly didn't have children. The nearest settlement, Silver Creek, was a day's ride. The cry came again, fainter this time, carried on a gust of wind that rattled the door hinges. Alara didn't think. She moved with the muscle memory of a woman who knew that hesitation meant death in the high country. She grabbed her heavy buffalo hide coat, wrapped a wool scarf around her face until only her eyes were visible, and snatched the lantern. She didn't take the rifle. She needed her hands free. Opening the door was like opening an airlock into a vacuum. The wind punched the breath out of her lungs. Snow, sharp as glass shards, blinded her immediately. She tied a safety rope to the porch railing and looped it around her waist. A lesson her father had taught her. Never step off the porch in a blizzard without a tether. She waded into the waist-deep drifts. "Hello!" she screamed, but the wind tore the word away instantly. She swept the lantern back and forth. Nothing but white swirling darkness. She was about to turn back, convinced her mind was playing tricks on her, when she saw a patch of color that defied the landscape. Red, deep, crimson red. It was a horse, or what was left of one. A majestic Mustang lay half buried in a drift, its legs broken, frozen solid in the act of falling. And there, tucked into the curve of the dead animal's belly, shielding it from the worst of the wind, was a bundle wrapped in leather and fur. Alara scrambled over the carcass, her hands numb inside her gloves. She reached for the bundle. It moved. Panic and adrenaline surged through her veins. She grabbed the bundle, clutching it to her chest, and turned back toward the dim yellow glow of her cabin window. The rope at her waist went taut. She had gone to the very end of her tether. Hand over hand, she hauled herself back, dragging the weight of 2 lives against the fury of nature. She tumbled through the door, kicking it shut and throwing the latch. The silence of the cabin was deafening after the roar outside. Ilara fell to her knees near the wood stove, shaking violently. She began to unwrap the bundle. Layers of deer hide, then a thick woolen blanket woven with intricate geometric patterns, black, red, and turquoise. She gasped. The baby was blue, his breathing shallow and rasping. He couldn't have been more than 6 months old. His skin was a rich copper tone, his hair jet black. Around his neck hung a small amulet carved from bone, a wolf's head. He was Shoshone, or perhaps Arapaho. Ilara didn't know the tribal distinctions well enough, but she knew one thing. This child belonged to the people, the townsfolk of Silver Creek, called the Savages. If Sheriff Silas Thorne found out she had this baby, he wouldn't help him. He'd likely let him freeze, or worse, use him as bait. "You're safe," Ilara whispered, stripping off her cold gloves and rubbing the infant's tiny limbs to generate heat. "I don't care who you are. You're safe." For 3 days, the blizzard raged. Ilara didn't sleep. She fed the boy warm goat's milk from a rag, rocking him as he fought off the chill that had settled deep in his lungs. She named him Sam, for lack of a name, whispering stories to him to keep herself awake. She realized something terrifying as she traced the beading on his blanket. This wasn't the blanket of a commoner. The beadwork was heavy, involving rare shells and intricate storytelling patterns. "You're important," she murmured, looking at the bone amulet. "Someone is looking for you, and they are going to be very, very angry." The storm broke on the morning of the 4th day. The sun rose over a world erased of all features. The fences, the path, the woodpile. Everything was a smooth, glittering sheet of white. Ilara stood at the window, the baby, now sleeping peacefully, his color returned, swaddled in a quilt in the crib she had improvised from a crate. She was making coffee when the ground began to vibrate. It wasn't the wind this time. It was the rhythmic thudding of hooves, many of them. Ilara grabbed her Winchester from the mantel. She checked the chamber. Loaded. She peered through the frost-rimmed glass. On the ridge overlooking her cabin, a line of silhouettes appeared against the blinding sun. There were at least 20 of them. Riders. They didn't ride like the cavalry, in neat columns. They rode with a fluid grace, their horses kicking up plumes of snow. The tribe, Ilara breathed. They descended the slope, circling the cabin. They were heavily armed, rifles, lances, and bows. Their faces were painted with black ash, the color of war, or mourning. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. If she fired, she died. If she didn't open the door, they might burn the cabin down. "Stay quiet, little one," she prayed to the sleeping infant. She unbolted the door and stepped out onto the porch, the rifle held across her chest, not aimed, but ready. The riders stopped 10 yards away. The steam from their horses' nostrils clouded the air. One man separated from the group. He rode a massive black stallion that looked more beast than horse. The man was imposing, with broad shoulders covered in a bear fur cloak. His face was sharp, angular, and terrified her more than any man she had ever seen. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow, and his eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently burning with a murderous rage. This was no ordinary brave. This was a leader. He stared at Ilara. Then he raised a hand. The riders behind him notched arrows. "Where is he?" the man demanded. Ilara blinked. He spoke English. His voice was deep, gravelly, and perfect. "Where is who?" Ilara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do not play games with me, white woman," the man growled. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots crunching in the snow. He walked toward the porch, ignoring the rifle she held. "We found the mother's horse. We saw the tracks. You took him." "I saved him," Alara snapped, her fear replaced by a sudden spark of indignation. "He was freezing to death in a snowbank." The man stopped at the foot of the stairs. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the soot on her dress, the way she stood between him and the door, like a mother bear. "If he is dead," the man said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "I will burn this valley to ash." Alara didn't flinch. "He is asleep, and if you wake him up with your shouting, you can rock him back to sleep yourself." The warriors behind him murmured, shocked by her tone. No one spoke to Chief Talon Blackwood that way, not even the elders. Talon's eyes narrowed. He stepped up onto the porch. Alara didn't back down, though he towered over her. "Show me," he commanded. Alara turned, leaving her back exposed, a sign of trust, or perhaps foolishness, and led him inside. The cabin was warm. The smell of sage and milk hung in the air. Talon moved silently to the crate near the stove. He looked down. The baby was awake now, chewing on his fist. He looked up at the looming figure and cooed. Talon let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He reached down, his large calloused hand trembling slightly as he brushed the baby's cheek. "My son," he whispered in his native tongue. Then in English, "Coda." He turned to Alara. The murder was gone from his eyes, replaced by a confusing intensity. He saw the empty milk bottles, the blankets warming by the fire, the dark circles of exhaustion on Alara's face. He saw that she had given everything she had to keep his bloodline alive while the storm raged. "You are Alara Vance," Talon said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know my name?" "My scouts watch this valley. We know who lives with honor and who lives with hate." He paused, his gaze piercing. "You are the daughter of the man who dug his own grave." Alara stiffened. "Yes." "You have done the Blackwood Band a great service today, Alara Vance. This boy, he is the future of my people." Talon straightened up, his demeanor shifting from father back to chief. "But you have also put yourself in great danger." "Danger? From who?" "You're the ones pointing arrows at me." Talon shook his head slowly. "Not from us, from your own kind." He walked to the window and pointed toward the town of Silver Creek. "Sheriff Thorne, he has been tracking us. He knows my wife and son were separated from the hunting party in the storm. He hopes to find the boy's body to claim the bounty on hostiles. If he finds out the boy is alive, and that you are harboring him, he would arrest me," Alara finished. "He would hang you," Talon corrected grimly. "For kidnapping. He would twist the truth to start the war he has wanted for years." Suddenly, a gunshot echoed in the valley. Talon's head snapped up. Outside, the warriors shouted warnings. Alara ran to the window. On the southern ridge, a new line of riders appeared. They wore the tin stars of deputies and the long dusters of hired guns. Leading them was Sheriff Silas Thorne, a man with a smile like a rattlesnake. "They are here," Talon said, drawing a long knife from his belt. "You can't fight them here," Alara cried. "You're outnumbered, and if you kill a sheriff in my front yard, I'm dead anyway." Talon looked at the baby, then at Alara. He made a decision that would change both their lives. "Then we do not fight," Talon said. "We run. Pack your things, Ilara Vance. Excuse me? I'm not going anywhere with you. Talon stepped close to her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The heat radiating from him was intense. Thorn sees my horses outside. He sees you inside. In his mind, you are already a traitor. If you stay, you die. If you come with me, you live. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was iron strong, but surprisingly gentle. Ride with me, he said, and I swear on the spirit of the wolf, no harm will come to you. Ilara looked at the sheriff's men descending the hill, then at the baby in the crate, and finally at the tall, dangerous chief offering her a lifeline. She grabbed her coat. I'll need my horse. The escape from the cabin was a blur of adrenaline and snow. Ilara had barely enough time to grab her father's leather saddlebags, stuffed with ammunition, dried jerky, and a small tin box containing the deed to her land. Before she was mounting her mare, Bess. Talon Blackwood didn't wait. He strapped the baby, Coda, securely to his chest in a specially designed cradleboard, shielding the infant with his own body. With a sharp whistle, he signaled his warriors. They wheeled their horses around, forming a protective phalanx around Ilara and the chief. Ride, Talon commanded. They thundered away from the cabin just as the first bullet splintered the wood of Ilara's porch railing. For the first hour, conversation was impossible. The wind whipped their faces as they pushed the horses hard through the drifts, heading toward the jagged teeth of the Wind River Range. Ilara looked back once. A plume of black smoke was rising into the pale sky. Sheriff Thorn had burned her cabin, her home. Everything she owned was gone. A cold knot of fury tightened in her stomach. There is no going back now, she thought. By midday, they reached the entrance to Dead Horse Canyon. It was a narrow, twisting slit in the earth, shadowed by towering red cliffs. Talon raised a fist, signaling the group to halt. The horses were blowing hard, steam rising from their flanks. We rest for 10 minutes, Talon said, sliding off his massive black stallion. He immediately checked on Coda. The baby was awake, his dark eyes watching the sky, remarkably calm. Ilara dismounted, her legs trembling from the ride. She checked Bess's hooves. You ride well for a settler, a voice said. Ilara turned. It was a young warrior, perhaps 18, with a scar across his cheek. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. I ride because I have to, not for sport, Ilara replied sharply. What is your name? I am Swift Elk, the boy said, and you should not be here. Thorn will bring the army. Thorn is a thief with a badge, Ilara spat, tightening her saddle girth. He doesn't want justice. He wants the land rights to this valley. Before Swift Elk could respond, a crack echoed off the canyon walls. Ping! Rock dust exploded inches from Ilara's head. Ambush! Talon roared. Thorn hadn't just followed them. He had sent a second posse to cut them off. Men appeared on the canyon rim high above, rifles glinting in the sun. Take cover! Ilara threw herself behind a boulder as bullets rained down, kicking up snow and dirt. The echoes were deafening in the narrow space. The warriors returned fire, their arrows and bullets singing through the air, but they were pinned down. They have the high ground, Talon shouted, crouching beside Ilara. We cannot move forward. If we stay here, we're dead. Ilara yelled over the gunfire. She looked up at the rim. She saw a man in a long duster signaling the others. It was Deputy Barnaby, Thorn's right-hand man, a cruel sharpshooter known for never missing. He was lining up a shot on Talon's exposed back. Talon was busy reloading his repeater, distracted by keeping Koda's cradleboard shielded behind the rock. Elara didn't think. She swung her Winchester up, resting the barrel on the boulder. It was a long shot, at least 200 yards, at a steep upward angle against the sun. "Don't," Talon warned, seeing her move. "Save your powder." Elara exhaled, steadying her breath as her father had taught her. "Aim small, Miss Small." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. High above, Deputy Barnaby jerked violently. He didn't fall, but his rifle went spinning out of his hands, plummeting into the canyon below. He clutched his shattered shoulder, screaming. The firing from the rim stopped for a split second, shocked that a shot had connected from that distance. "Now!" Elara screamed. "Go now!" Talon looked at her, his eyes wide with a sudden, fierce respect. He whistled piercingly. "Heir!" The group mounted in seconds. Under the cover of Elara's suppressive fire, they bolted through the choke point of the canyon. They rode like demons, dodging the sporadic shots that followed them, until the canyon widened and the terrain became too rough for the posse on the rim to follow. They didn't stop until nightfall. They made camp in a hidden cave system near the roaring Fork River. The fire was kept small to avoid smoke. Elara sat apart from the others, cleaning her rifle. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had faded. She had shot a man. She didn't know if he was dead, but she had drawn blood. A shadow fell over her. Talon stood there, holding a strip of dried venison. "Eat," he said. Elara took it. "Did we lose them?" "For now. The snow is starting again. It will cover our tracks." Talon sat down across from her. The firelight danced on his sharp features. "You saved my life today, Elara Vance, and my son's." "I was saving my own hide," Elara muttered, though her heart skipped a beat at his nearness. "Swift Elk told me you aimed for the shoulder," Talon said quietly. "You could have killed him." "I'm not a murderer, Talon. Unlike the men chasing us." Talon leaned forward. "You are a warrior. In my tribe, when a woman fights with the spirit of a bear, we give her a name. I have a name. Yes, but now the spirits know you too." He reached into a pouch at his waist and pulled out a small, smooth stone, painted with a blue lightning bolt. He pressed it into her hand. "Keep this. It means you are under my protection. No warrior in my band will touch you." Elara fingered the cool stone. "And what happens when we get to your camp? Will they welcome a white woman?" Talon's face darkened. He looked away, toward the sleeping form of his son. "That," he said heavily, "is a battle I do not know if we can win. The Council of Elders, they do not trust easily, and there are those who wish for me to fail." "Who?" "Cyrus Redhawk, my cousin. He believes peace is a disease. He wants war with the settlers. Bringing you into the camp, he will see it as weakness or treason." Elara shivered, not from the cold. "Great. So I traded a hanging judge for a warmongering cousin." Talon looked her in the eye, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Do not worry, Elara. You are a woman who shoots the gun out of a man's hand at 200 yards. I think Cyrus Redhawk should be the one who is worried." The Blackwood encampment was unlike anything Elara had ever imagined. Located in a deep, geothermally active valley known as the Warm Lands, the camp was hidden from the harsh winter by high cliffs and fed by hot springs. The snow here was thin, and steam rose from the earth in mystical swirls. Dozens of teepees, painted with vibrant stories of hunts and battles, dotted the valley floor. As they rode in, a silence fell over the camp. Women stopped their weaving. Children stopped playing. hundreds of eyes fixed on Alara. The only sound was the barking of dogs and the rhythmic thud of the horses. Alara kept her head high, gripping her reins tightly. She felt the weight of their judgment. To them, she was the enemy, the face of the people who stole their land. Talon rode straight to the center of the camp where a massive lodge stood. He dismounted and raised Coda high in the air. "The heir returns!" he bellowed. A cheer erupted, hesitant at first, then roaring. People rushed forward, weeping, reaching out to touch the hem of the baby's blanket. They had thought the chief's line was broken, but the joy was cut short when Talon gestured for Alara to dismount. The crowd parted. A hush fell again. An older man stepped out of the main lodge. He wore a headdress of eagle feathers that trailed to the ground. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes milky with age but sharp with wisdom. This was Elder Hakan. Beside him stood a younger man, broad-chested and scowling, his hand resting on a tomahawk. This was Cyrus Redhawk. "You bring a guest, Talon?" Cyrus sneered, his voice carrying across the silence. "Or a prisoner?" "I bring a savior," Talon announced, his voice booming. "This woman, Alara Vance, pulled my son from the ice when the storm took his mother. She fed him. She warmed him. She fought Thorn's deputies to protect him." Cyrus spat on the ground near Alara's boots. "She is a white devil, a spy. Look at her clothes. She smells of the town. She smells of courage." Talon stepped between Cyrus and Alara. The tension was palpable. "She is under my protection. The law of the tribe says no outsider may live within the warm lands." Elder Hakan spoke softly, his voice raspy, "unless they are blood or bound." "She cannot stay," Cyrus declared. "Give her a horse and send her back. Let the winter take her." "If I go back," Alara spoke up, her voice trembling slightly, but loud enough to be heard, "Sheriff Thorn will hang me. He burned my home because I helped your chief. I have nowhere to go." Cyrus laughed cruelly. "That is not our concern." Talon looked at Alara. He saw the fear she tried to hide. He saw the woman who had saved his only son. He knew what he had to do. It was a move that would shock the tribe and bind his fate to hers forever. "She does not go back," Talon said firmly. He turned to Elder Hakan. "You spoke of the law. Outsiders cannot stay unless they are blood or bound." Talon walked over to Alara. He took her hand in front of the entire tribe. Alara flinched, confused. "Talon, what are you doing?" she whispered. "Trust me," he murmured. Then, raising his voice, he addressed the council. "I claim the right of sanctuary through union. I will take Alara Vance as my wife." The gasp that went through the crowd was louder than the wind in the canyon. Alara's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious," she hissed. "It is the only way," Talon whispered back, his grip tightening. "If you are my wife, you are Blackwood. You are sovereign. Thorn cannot touch you, and Cyrus cannot expel you." Cyrus looked furious. "This is madness. You would dilute the blood of the chiefs with this settler?" "I would honor the woman who saved the future of this tribe," Talon roared, silencing him. "Unless any man here wishes to challenge me for the right of leadership." He placed his hand on his knife. He looked at Cyrus. The challenge was clear. Fight me or shut up. Cyrus glared, his knuckles white on his weapon, but he did not draw. He stepped back. "The spirits will weep for this," he muttered, and stormed off. Elder Hakan nodded slowly. "The chief has spoken. The ceremony will take place at the next full moon. Until then, she sleeps in the guest lodge." As the crowd dispersed, muttering and whispering, Alara pulled her hand away. She was furious, terrified, and overwhelmed. A marriage? She demanded as soon as they were alone. You didn't think to ask me first. There was no time to ask, Talon said, his face unreadable. It is a marriage of protection, Alara, nothing more. You will have your own side of the lodge. I will not touch you. Alara crossed her arms. And what about love, Talon? Every girl dreams of her wedding day. I didn't dream of a political arrangement to save my neck. Talon stepped closer. The intensity in his eyes returned, the same look he had when he saw her hold his son. Love is a luxury for peacetime, Alara. We are at war. He paused, his voice softening. But I have seen your heart. You are strong. You are loyal. A man could do far worse than to be bound to a woman like you. Alara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. And, Talon added, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his belt, there is this. He handed it to her. It was a wanted poster. Wanted. Dead or alive. Alara Vance for the kidnapping of a minor and the attempted murder of Deputy Barnaby. Bounty. $5,000. Alara stared at the paper. $5,000. Every bounty hunter from Texas to the Dakota Territory would be looking for her. You see, Talon said gently, the world out there wants you dead. Here, you are a queen. Be my wife, Alara. Help me raise Coda. Help me fight Thorn. Alara looked at the poster, then at the rugged, imposing man, offering her a strange, dangerous kind of safety. She thought of the baby boy with the bone amulet. She took a deep breath. Fine, she said. I'll marry you, Chief Blackwood, but I have conditions. Talon smirked. I expected nothing less. 1, I keep my gun. 2, I don't cook for the whole tribe. And 3, she poked him in the chest. If you ever try to control me like a horse, I'll shoot you too. Talon threw his head back and laughed, a rich, deep sound that echoed off the canyon walls. Agreed, frontier girl, agreed. But as they shook hands on the deal, neither of them noticed the shadow watching from the edge of the camp. A scout, loyal to Cyrus, slipped away into the darkness, riding hard toward the town of Silver Creek. He wasn't going to fight Talon. He was going to sell him out to Sheriff Thorn. The wedding would be the perfect trap. 2 weeks passed in the Valley of the Warmlands. To Alara's surprise, they were the most peaceful weeks of her life. She had expected to be treated as a prisoner or an outcast, but the tribe was pragmatic. They saw how the baby, Coda, quieted instantly when Alara held him. They saw how she worked alongside the women to scrape hides, her hands blistered but never stopping. She was earning her keep. Talon kept his word. He slept on the opposite side of the lodge, treating her with a distant, respectful courtesy. But the distance was shrinking. One evening, as the sun dipped below the canyon rim, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange, Alara sat by the stream, washing Coda's clothes. Talon approached silently. He sat on a rock nearby, sharpening his knife with a rhythmic shh sound. The elders are pleased, Talon said. They say you have the hands of a healer and the back of a mule. Alara laughed, splashing water. I think that was a compliment. In Silver Creek, calling a woman a mule gets you slapped. In the mountains, a mule is more valuable than a gold nugget, Talon replied, a rare smile touching his eyes. It means you do not break. He put the knife away. The moon is full in 2 nights. The ceremony is prepared. Have you changed your mind? Alara looked down at the rushing water. Would it matter if I did? Thorn is still out there. It matters to me, Talon said softly. He moved from the rock to kneel beside her. For the first time, he reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, scarred from 100 battles, but his touch was electric. "I told you this was a marriage of protection," Talon said, his voice low. "But I do not want you to stand by the fire with me only because you fear the hangman. I want you to stand there because you choose to." Elara looked up into his dark, intense eyes. She saw the loneliness of a leader who carried the weight of his people. She saw the grieving father who found hope in a stranger. "I never chose the frontier," Elara whispered. "My father dragged me here. I hated the cold. I hated the silence. But here, with Coda, with you, I don't feel alone anymore." Talon leaned in. Their foreheads touched, a gesture of intimacy Elara had seen the other couples do. "Then let us make a new vow, not for politics, for us." They stayed by the river until the stars came out, sharing stories of their pasts. Elara talking about the books she used to read in Boston. Talon speaking of the first time he hunted a cougar. It was a fragile, beautiful peace. But while love was blooming by the river, hate was festering in the shadows. 10 miles away, in a narrow ravine known as Devil's Throat, a solitary rider waited. It was the scout loyal to Cyrus Redhawk. He held a torch aloft. Moments later, Sheriff Silas Thorne rode out of the darkness, flanked by 20 heavily armed men. Thorne looked different, harder, meaner. He was smoking a thin cigar. "You have news, Savage?" Thorne sneered. The scout ignored the insult. "The wedding is in 2 nights. The entire tribe will be gathered in the central ring. The drums will be loud. They will not hear you coming." Thorne grinned, the cigar glowing like a demon's eye. "And the girl?" "She will be in the center, unarmed, dressed in the ceremonial leathers." "Good," Thorne said, tossing a heavy bag of silver coins to the scout. "You tell Cyrus to keep his men in the northern tents. If they stay out of the fight, I'll leave them alive. Talon dies. The girl comes with me." "And the baby?" the scout asked. Thorne's face went cold. "There can be no heirs to land I intend to own. Burn the lodge. If the brat is inside, that's God's will." The scout nodded and vanished into the night. Thorne turned to his deputies. "Check your rifles, boys," Thorne growled. "We're going to a wedding." The day of the ceremony dawned with an ominous, heavy gray sky. The air was thick with static. Elara was prepared by the elder women. They dressed her in a tunic of white doeskin, soft as velvet, beaded with thousands of tiny glass beads that shimmered in the firelight. They braided eagle feathers into her hair. When she looked in the polished copper mirror, she didn't recognize herself. She looked like a queen of the high plains. "You are beautiful," a voice said. She turned to see Talon standing at the entrance of the lodge. He wore his full chieftain regalia, a headdress of black and white feathers, a breastplate of bone, and paint on his chest. He looked magnificent and terrifying. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," Elara replied, her heart hammering. They walked out together toward the central fire. The drums began, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat that seemed to vibrate in Elara's chest. Hundreds of tribe members surrounded the fire, chanting a low, ancient song. Elara scanned the crowd. She saw Cyrus Redhawk standing near the back, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He wasn't singing. A shiver of unease went down her spine, but she pushed it away. Elder Hawkins stood before the fire. He took Elara's hand and Talon's hand. "Tonight, 2 bloods become 1, Hawken intoned. "Tonight, the wolf takes a mate." He began the binding ritual, wrapping a leather cord around their joined hands. Elara looked at Talon. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking only at her. "I, Talon Blackwood," he said, his voice ringing clear, "pledge my life to yours. Your enemy is my enemy. Your breath is my breath." "I, Elara Vance," she replied, her voice trembling but gaining strength, "pledge my heart to yours. Where you ride, I ride." Haakon raised a bowl of water to bless them. "Then by the power of the spirits and the earth, I declare you—" Crack. The sound wasn't thunder. It was the sharp, unmistakable retort of a high-powered buffalo rifle. Elder Hakon's eyes went wide. The bowl of water shattered in his hands, spraying Elara with water and blood. The old man crumpled to the ground, a red hole in his chest. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then chaos exploded. "Sniper!" Talon roared, shoving Elara down just as a second bullet whizzed past her ear. "Get down! Everyone down!" From the ridges surrounding the valley, muzzle flashes lit up the night like fireflies. Thorn's men were firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Women screamed, grabbing their children. Warriors scrambled for their weapons, but they were caught in the open, illuminated by the bonfire. "To the horses!" Talon commanded, dragging Elara behind the cover of a large log. "Where is Coda?" "He's in the lodge, with the wet nurse," Elara screamed. "Go to him. I will hold them off." "No, I'm not leaving you. Go." Talon shoved her toward the lodge. He drew his repeater and stood up, firing blindly into the darkness, drawing the enemy's fire to give her a chance. Elara scrambled on her hands and knees through the mud and snow. Bullets kicked up dirt into her eyes. She saw Swift Elk, the young warrior she had met earlier, take an arrow to the leg. No, it was a bullet. He fell, returning fire with his bow. She reached the lodge. It was already burning. Thorn's men had thrown torches onto the dry skins. "Coda!" she screamed, diving into the smoke. Inside, the heat was intense. The wet nurse was slumped in the corner, unconscious from the smoke or a blow to the head, but the cradle board was empty. Elara's heart stopped. He's gone. She stumbled back out coughing, her eyes streaming. The camp was a war zone. The smell of gunpowder and burning flesh overwhelmed the scent of sage. Through the smoke, she saw a nightmare unfolding. Sheriff Thorn rode into the center of the camp on a white horse, looking like a horseman of the apocalypse. He held a revolver in one hand and a rope in the other. "Burn it all," Thorn laughed. "Leave no rats alive." Talon was fighting like a demon in the center ring. He had run out of ammunition and was using his tomahawk and knife, cutting down 2 deputies who tried to rush him. But he was surrounded. "Talon behind you!" Elara screamed. Talon spun around, deflecting a saber blow from a mounted deputy, dragging the man off his horse. Then Elara saw Cyrus Redhawk. He was standing near the horse corral, watching. His men were mounted, but they weren't fighting Thorn. They were just watching. "Cyrus, help him!" Elara shrieked, running toward him. "He's your blood." Cyrus looked at Elara, then at Talon, who was now bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. He looked at the burning village. He looked at Thorn, who was laughing as he shot a dog that tried to bite his horse. Something broke in Cyrus. The reality of his deal with the devil hit him. He had wanted power, but he hadn't wanted this. He hadn't wanted the slaughter of his people. Cyrus let out a war cry that shook the valley. "Blackwood! To me!" He kicked his horse into a gallop, not away from the fight, but straight at Thorn. "Traitor!" Thorn yelled, leveling his pistol. Bang! Bang! Cyrus took 2 bullets to the chest, but his momentum carried him forward. He crashed his horse into thorns, knocking the sheriff to the muddy ground. It gave Talon a split second. He whistled for his black stallion. Ilara! Talon rode through the fire, reaching his hand down. Ilara sprinted toward him. She reached up. A lasso whipped through the air. It tightened around Ilara's waist with a brutal jerk, snapping her ribs. She was yanked backward, her fingertips brushing Talon's hand. She hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of her. One of Thorn's deputies, a giant of a man, dragged her through the mud. Got the girl, Sheriff! Thorn scrambled up from the mud, his face bloody from the fall. He shot the dying Cyrus Redhawk in the head to finish him, then turned his eyes to Ilara. String her up! Thorn yelled. No! Talon turned his horse to charge, but a volley of rifle fire from the ridge blocked his path. His stallion reared, hit in the flank. Go, Talon! Ilara screamed, struggling against the rope. Find Coda! They took Coda! Talon hesitated. He looked at his wife, bound and being dragged away. He looked at the burning lodge where his son had been. He looked at the overwhelming force of 30 men moving to encircle him. If he stayed, he died. If he died, Coda died. And Ilara had no one to save her. With a roar of pure, agonizing rage, Talon turned his wounded stallion and galloped toward the river, the only exit Thorn hadn't blocked. Coward! Thorn yelled, firing his pistol after him until it clicked empty. Thorn walked over to Ilara. She was gasping for air, her beautiful wedding dress ripped and stained with mud and blood. Thorn grabbed her by the hair and yanked her face up. Well, Mrs. Blackwood, Thorn sneered, holstering his gun. Looks like the honeymoon is over. Ilara spat a mouthful of blood into his face. Thorn wiped it away slowly. He didn't hit her. He smiled, a terrible, victorious smile. Deputy, Thorn said calmly, shackle her. We're taking her back to Silver Creek. I don't want to kill her here. I want the whole territory to see this. What charge, Sheriff? The deputy asked, clicking heavy iron cuffs onto Ilara's wrists. Thorn looked at the burning Indian village. Treason, Thorn said, and murder of a federal officer. She's going to hang, and I'm going to sell tickets. As they threw Ilara over the back of a horse like a sack of flour, she looked back one last time. The snow was falling again, covering the dead. Talon was gone. Coda was gone. She was alone. But as the cold metal of the cuffs bit into her skin, Ilara didn't cry. A cold, hard resolve settled in her heart. I am not Ilara Vance anymore, she thought. I am Ilara Blackwood, and I will burn your world down, Silas Thorn. The jail cell in Silver Creek smelled of damp earth and despair. For 2 days, Ilara sat on the cold stone floor, her wrists rubbed raw by the iron shackles. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flames consuming the lodge. She saw Talon's desperate eyes as he rode away. She heard the phantom cry of Coda. The town was buzzing outside. Through the small barred window, she could hear the sounds of hammers hitting wood. They were building the gallows. The heavy iron door creaked open. Sheriff Silas Thorn stepped in, dressed in his Sunday best, a black suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silver bolo tie. He looked like a respectable man. He looked like the devil. Morning, Mrs. Blackwood, Thorn said, his voice dripping with false pity. The circuit judge has arrived. Judge Sterling. He's a busy man, so we're doing this quick. Trial at 10, hanging at noon. Ilara didn't look up. You won't get away with this, Silas. I already have. Thorn chuckled, lighting a cigar. Who's going to stop me? Your husband? He's freezing in the mountains, if he isn't dead already. The baby? Buried in the ash. And you? You're just a cautionary tale about what happens when a decent white woman forgets her place. He blew smoke into the small cell. I have the town in a frenzy, Alara. They think you helped those savages scalp Deputy Miller. They're ready to tear you apart before the rope even tightens. Ilara stood up slowly. She was dirty, bruised, and exhausted, but her eyes burned with a cold, hard light. You forgot one thing, Sheriff, she said quietly. And what's that? I'm not a Vance anymore. I'm a Blackwood, and wolves hunt in packs. Thorne laughed, a harsh barking sound. Your pack is dead, girl. He gestured to the deputy. Bring her. The courtroom. The Silver Creek Saloon had been converted into a makeshift courthouse. Every table was packed. Men stood on the bar, jeering and spitting as Alara was dragged in. Traitor! Injun lover! Hang her! Judge Sterling sat at a high table near the piano. He was a sweating, red-faced man who looked like he'd already had a few whiskeys for breakfast. Order! Sterling banged a gavel. Order in this court. The noise subsided to a dull roar. Thorne shoved Alara into a chair in the center of the room. She sat straight, refusing to cower. Alara Vance, the judge read from a paper. You are charged with treason against the United States, conspiracy with hostile forces, and the murder of Deputy Barnaby during the ambush at Dead Horse Canyon. How do you plead? I plead that this man, Ilara pointed a shackled finger at Thorne, is a liar and a murderer. He attacked a peaceful camp. He killed women and children. Objection, Thorne shouted, stepping forward. The accused is hysterical. We tracked a war party to that canyon. They opened fire first. Deputy Barnaby was a good man, shot in cold blood by this woman's rifle. The crowd murmured angrily. I have witnesses, Thorne continued. He pointed to his deputies. They all saw it. We saw it, Judge, one deputy yelled. She shot him right out of the saddle. Judge Sterling wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. The evidence seems damning. Does the defense have any witnesses? Ilara looked around the room. A sea of hateful faces. She was alone. I didn't kill Deputy Barnaby, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I shot him in the shoulder to stop him from killing my husband. If he's dead, it's because Thorne let him die. Lies, Thorne roared. I tried to save him, but the wound was too deep. The judge nodded. I've heard enough. In light of the overwhelming testimony and the defendant's own admission of firing upon an officer of the law, he reached for the black cap that signaled a death sentence. I sentence you, Alara Vance, to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul. The gavel raised. Boom. The double doors of the saloon didn't open. They exploded inward. Splinters of wood showered the crowd. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway, framed by the blinding white snow outside, was a figure that looked like a nightmare from the old tales. It was Talon Blackwood. He was not hiding. He was not sneaking. He stood in full view, his buffalo coat open to reveal the 2 Colt revolvers strapped to his waist. But he wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a piece of paper, and he wasn't alone. Flanking him were 4 men in long gray coats, carrying Winchester repeaters. On their chests shone the silver stars of the United States Marshal Service. Stop the proceedings, the lead marshal shouted, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. Thorne went pale. Who are you? This is a local matter. I am U.S. Marshal Jeremiah Stone, the man barked, stepping into the room. And this is not a local matter anymore. It is a federal investigation into massacre and corruption. Talon walked forward. The crowd parted for him, terrified by his presence. He walked straight to Alara. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at Thorn. He looked only at her. "I told you," Talon whispered, touching her cheek with a gloved hand. "Where you ride, I ride." "You're late," Alara breathed, tears finally spilling over. "I had to pick up a friend," Talon said, turning to face the room. He gestured to the door. Two of the marshals dragged a man into the light. He was pale, missing an arm, and looked half dead. But he was alive. It was Deputy Barnaby. A collective gasp went through the room. "Barnaby?" Thorn whispered, his eyes bulging. You're dead." "No thanks to you, Silas," Barnaby rasped, his voice weak but audible in the silent room. He looked at the crowd. "Thorn left me in the canyon. He said I was slowing them down. He told me to die quietly." He pointed a trembling finger at Talon. "The Indian, the chief, he came back. He cauterized the wound. He fed me. He carried me to the army fort." Barnaby turned his gaze to the judge. "There was no war party, Judge. Thorn wanted the land. The Blackwood camp sits on the largest gold vein in the territory. Thorn found out about it 6 months ago. He wanted them dead so he could file the claim." The room exploded into chaos. The townspeople turned to look at Thorn, their anger shifting like the wind. "Is this true, Silas?" Judge Sterling demanded, standing up. Thorn looked around like a trapped rat. His empire of lies was crumbling in seconds. He looked at Alara, sitting there, with the hope returning to her eyes. He looked at Talon, the savage who had outsmarted him with mercy. Thorn snapped. "To hell with this," Thorn screamed. He drew his revolver with lightning speed, but he didn't aim at Talon. He aimed at the witness, Barnaby. Bang! The shot went wild, hitting the piano, because in that split second, a tomahawk spun through the air. Talon had thrown it before Thorn even cleared leather. The blade buried itself deep into Thorn's right shoulder, the exact same spot where Alara had shot Barnaby. Thorn screamed, dropping the gun, clutching his shattered shoulder. He fell to his knees, writhing in agony. The marshals were on him instantly, guns drawn. "Silas Thorn," Marshal Stone announced, looming over him. "You are under arrest for murder, fraud, and the attempted massacre of a protected tribe." Thorn looked up, his face gray with pain. He looked at Talon. You're nothing but a dog," Thorn spat. Talon walked over. He pulled his tomahawk from Thorn's shoulder with a sickening squelch, wiping the blood on Thorn's expensive suit. "I am the wolf," Talon said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you just lost your teeth." Talon turned to the deputy holding the keys. "Unchain my wife." The deputy scrambled to obey, his hands shaking. As the cuffs clicked open and fell to the floor, Alara leaped up. She didn't care about the crowd, the judge, or the marshals. She threw her arms around Talon's neck, burying her face in his chest. "Coda?" she asked, muffled against his coat. "Safe," Talon murmured, holding her tight. "My sister took him up the narrow pass before the fighting started. He is waiting for us." The conclusion. 3 days later, the town of Silver Creek was a different place. Judge Sterling, fearing for his own job, had quickly dismissed all charges against Alara. The land deed to the Warm Lands was officially recognized by the federal government as Blackwood territory, protected by treaty. Alara stood on the porch of a new cabin, one built by the combined efforts of the tribe and the townspeople who, shamed by the truth, had come to make amends. The snow had stopped. The sun was shining on the white peaks. Alara watched as Talon rode toward her from the tree line. Coda was strapped to his chest, babbling happily at the sight of his mother. Talon dismounted and handed the boy to Alara. She hugged the child, smelling the sage and wood smoke on him, feeling the warmth of his small body. "Thorn hangs tomorrow," Talon said quietly, standing beside her, "at the very gallows he built for you." "I won't be watching," Alara said, looking out at the valley. "I'm done with death." Talon wrapped his arm around her waist. "Then what will you do, Mrs. Blackwood?" Alara smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. She looked at the man who had come for her through the blizzard, through the fire, and through the hatred of the world. "I think," Alara said, "I'm going to teach our son how to ride." Talon laughed, the sound echoing freely in the valley that finally truly belonged to them. "He is a Blackwood," Talon said. "He already knows." And that is the legend of the frontier bride, a woman who saved a life in the storm, and in return was given a love that could conquer the world. Sheriff Thorne thought he had the power of the law, but he forgot that in the Wild West, the only law that matters is the loyalty of the pack. What did you think of Alara's choice? Would you have taken the shot at the deputy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next episode of Legends of the West. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next trail.